Hi, Founder fans, Jason here, and today we are continuing our discussion with the Federal Farmer series of Anti-Federalist Papers. Today we are discussing observation number 4. Yes, while most Anti-Federalists either call their articles papers or essays, the Federal Farmer calls them observations because he's a fancy pants like that. So let's get into number 4. Very specifically, number 4 is written in response to the Statehouse Yard speech given by James Wilson. Now, Wilson was one of the authors of the United States Constitution, and just a few weeks after its signing, felt the need to defend it as kind of a prequel to the Federalist Papers that would come out later. And Wilson gave a speech at the Pennsylvania Statehouse, which was later published and reprinted throughout the young nation. Now, the Federal Farmer at this point had already been writing Anti-Federalist Papers, so it's not till number 4 that he actually responds to Wilson. He does not discuss Wilson directly, but he does say certain people are saying and things like that nature, because you don't want to call someone out directly. You'd be challenged to a duel, presuming your identity could be found out, which, to be fair, Federal Farmer's identity still is not 100% known, though I'll remind you, it's probably Melancton Smith. Now let's get into his arguments. First of all, most of the Statehouse Yard speech, the core of it says that you shouldn't be afraid of the Constitution because its powers are, quote, enumerated, as in they are very specifically defined there. Now, the Federalist Farmer's argument is, no, they don't seem to be. Now, the first example the Federal Farmer brings up is taxes. Now, taxes are supposed to be apportioned by states. Again, there have been amendments to the Constitution since then, but originally was supposed to be apportioned by state, and they are supposed to be collected by the federal government. However, in no fashion does it say whether that money should be collected directly from the state coffers or whether the federal government can go and take that money from civilians. Now, the Federal Farmer doesn't say whether this is good or bad, although as an anti-federalist, most assuredly thought it was bad. What he's saying is this is not clearly defined, and that is really one of the main arguments that the main argument of this paper, but a main argument of anti-federalists in general. This is not clearly defined. He then goes on to discuss the executive branch. He looks at Article 2 of the Constitution, which says that Congress can appoint, quote, inferior officers to assist the president in doing his job. Now, the question is, how many inferior officers? What jobs are these inferior officers supposed to do? And what's to stop Congress from just taking all these powers for the inferior offices and giving it all to the president to make the president a more powerful position? Again, not very clearly defined according to the Federal Farmer. He also goes on to talk about the part of the Constitution which discusses the judicial branch, specifically that the courts are supposed to have appellate jurisdiction, but with such exceptions as Congress should make. Literally, quote, it says, with such exceptions. And he says, okay, what are those exceptions? That Congress has the ability to just change what jurisdiction the Supreme Court has. Please let us know. Again, further proving the point, arguing against James Wilson that it's not necessarily so clearly defined as many Federalists would have you believe. He then goes on to move from clearly defined to what he considers unsecure parts of the government under the Constitution. Some of these are familiar to anti-federalist readers. Some of them are fairly unique, including the first one, where he points out that the judicial branch, the Supreme Court, is supposed to uphold peace treaties. I apologize. Peace treaties are supposed to be the supreme law of the land. So if the President of the United States and the United States Senate come to an agreement on a peace treaty, then that treaty supersedes all local, state, and even federal rules according to the Constitution. And the Federal Farmer asks, why isn't there a provision saying that any treaties must at least fall in line with the Constitution itself? There's nothing in there to say that the President and the Senate couldn't make a treaty with the King of Great Britain that says the United States will do whatever the King of Great Britain wants. Any law that the King of Great Britain passes and says is for the United States, we're going to do that. According to the Constitution, should the President and Senate, which I'll remind you, at the beginning was only 26 people, and a quorum was 17 people, and half of that quorum was 9 people. So the President and 9 senators could sign a treaty that says we cede all the rights of the United States to the King of Great Britain. And that is not unconstitutional according to the Constitution itself, or I should say, according to the federal farmer, because the Constitution does not specifically say you can't do that. Again, not enumerated, as many Federalists were arguing at the time. I know it sounds a little crazy, and my example certainly is crazy, but that is theoretically open to interpretation, again, according to the federal farmer. He goes on to discuss the old anti-federalist favorite, the necessary and proper clause. One part of the Constitution, it says it can do anything necessary, quote, necessary and proper, which is a very famous clause in the Constitution, to carry on the tasks of government. And the question, again, becomes, what is necessary and proper? Because out of the right persuasive mouth, you could argue that anything would be necessary and proper. Certain people could probably make a convincing argument that ceding all power of the United States to the King of Great Britain is necessary and proper. I'm not going to make that argument, but someone probably could do a good job of it. And again, that means necessary and proper is a very open-ended question, and it's not specifically enumerated. He also goes on to discuss that there's no Bill of Rights. Obviously, there should be a Bill of Rights. The biggest thing the Anti-Federalists ever get done is securing the Bill of Rights, which comes around just a few years later. And he goes on to discuss the amendment process. He says, what's to stop if there's just a handful of wealthy people who he's, as we've discussed, explained in previous papers, he was under the impression that a small group of wealthy people would slowly accumulate the power and control of the United States government. If these people secure control of the government, what's to make them, why would they ever want to change it? No matter what happens in the country that should warrant a change or amendment to the Constitution, why would they ever change it? That's only going to adversely ever affect their own power. I also want to point out that one thing that struck me, actually, as we're talking here, is he doesn't reference the standing army, which is usually an old stomping ground for anti-federalists also, that there is no limit to the standing army itself. Usually the anti-federalists would argue we can have a standing army, but we should just have enough to maintain our bases and our naval ships. We shouldn't just have them hanging around. But he does not reference this in this, which I am a little bit surprised about. So, but in general, that is the argument of Federal Farmer number 4, one of the most interesting anti-federalist papers I've read yet, because not only is it debating James Wilson as opposed to Hamilton and Madison and Jay in the Federalist Papers, but he pulls up a lot of interesting points about the open-endedness and undefined powers of the United States Constitution. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, definitely hit like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments, do you think he was a little excessive in his judgment of the definition of powers, or do you think, hey, well, he's got a few good points there? I'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for watching, and I'll be back with another founder for you tomorrow.